I just thought of a very clever idea. Instead of removing all these southern statues of Mr. General Lee or the like from different southern states in America, why don't we remove all the statues of Judaism, Jesus Christ, Yesua, Moses, and Muhammad? Because, the Hebrew Orthodox religion is not supposed to believe in idolatry. Neither is Christianity or Islam. But conversely, ironically, they have statues of Yeshua Jesus Christ, the Redeemer, and maybe Moses or, the Kaaba, which is Islam, and they don't really follow their own rules, do they? So it's quite frustrating to understand. For 5,700 years, the Hebrew Orthodox sect of Judaism are a bunch of, not well-educated goat herders from Egypt, let's say in Africa, or Israel, or Saudi Arabia, or Palestine. Some, broke farmers and goat herders, and some scholars and prophets nonetheless, then decided that the whole world should be Jewish or believe in Hebrew Orthodox Judaism and create a whole cult in 3 separate versions that has killed millions of people over 5,700 years while convincing people that the end of the world is promised to them through a revelation of God. But what they didn't understand is that their own destructive means, by not following their rules of thou shalt not kill, or thou shalt not steal, or Moses says, Shalom, God's Egypt, commands of God, the 10 commands that extended into the Torah by the Jewish Hebrew Orthodox sect of goat herders from the East nonetheless, and then said, let's crucify a Messiah because we don't believe in killing. Let's steal the land because we don't believe in stealing. And then we'll call it fair and legal because we say so, right? Then we'll have the Christian Crusades. Then you'll have millions of Jew slaves. You'll have Hebrew Orthodox poverty. Then you'll have massive Christian Crusades against the Muslims. And then these Muslims, then all of these 3 Jewish sects, that they cannot agree and follow their own rules of idolatry. So you have Yeshua Jesus Christ, who's the Messiah. You have Hebrew Orthodox Moses, or Abraham before him, who's the father of man. Then you have Moses of God, God's commands in stone, but as in flesh, the man who parted the Red Sea, nonetheless for the Jews, so they could exodus themselves away from God's Egypt, right? So they could move wherever they want to and break the rules there also. And then say it's quite legal if they want to because they wrote a new exception to their own rules. And then they raise taxes, make people slaves, build a temple they can't afford, build some more architecture that's useless, totally aesthetic, decorative nonsense. Serves no practical purpose beside worshipping and abusing people and getting drunk. And then saying the blood of Jesus is wine, of course. That's the exception to the rule when all the oceans are salt water, aren't they? They're not wine. So you've turned earth into a spirituality of 2/3 of goat-herding, delusional brainwashed sect of 3 Hebrew Orthodox, Christianity and Islam. It doesn't make sense. It doesn't work. You have goat-herding cults believing 2/3 of the world is Hasidic Orthodox Hebrews, Christians from Israel, Palestinian Christians, and then Saudi Arabian Muslims. When you have more logical spirituality of Buddhism or non-violent Buddhism, which has never really caused a war beside the Chinese government, the Taoists killing these poor Buddhists. That happened once, and that wasn't the fault of the Buddhists. And you have yoga, which is 50,000 years old. from India. And Buddhism, which was 500 years before Christ, that has never caused a war. No holy wars there. Yet mankind chooses the three Hebrew Orthodox sects of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam that have killed millions of people and enslaved mankind, while overtaxing them, making ridiculous claims, and then telling people the end of the world is promised to them, when actually their own behaviors, by not following Moses' commands of thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not steal, and thou shalt not judge each other, have really caused most of the holy wars. Their greed, their envy, all of the 7 deadly sins they were supposed to avoid, they've built industries around. And guess what? It didn't work, did it? Every country that Judaism, Christianity, and Islam is involved in, every country or nation is broke, isn't it? It's absolutely bankrupt. And you have all of these people prisoners. You have a Jewish prison state, essentially, is what this has created. And that's not what God invented spirituality or religion for. It was not to enslave man by the Jewish goat-herding sect of the Israelites. It was not what God intended. It was man's indifference to his older spirituality of yoga and even Buddhism, which they chose poison instead of water. Like Jesus' blood was wine, right? So the oceans are salt water. So you can survive by drinking salt water because your body is 70% salt water. It's not 70% wine, is it? So believing in turning water into wine is ridiculous. That's absolute nonsense. It's like saying, well, let's poison ourselves, we'll overtax each other, we'll call ourselves non-idolatrous goat herders from Israel, Palestine, or Saudi Arabia, or Egypt, and then we'll ruin ourselves for 5,700 years. We'll build Egyptian pyramids, we'll build temples, we'll build Christian churches, and we'll build Islam mosques, and let's just see how many people we can kill, enslave, and then say we forgive everyone and we praise a Messiah or a prophet of God, right? It's nonsense. It doesn't work. You have to look at the deleterious effects of this. In Buddhism, there's not been a missionary to try to convert one person to Buddhism. People come to Buddhism because they know they will survive. It's quite embarrassing, isn't it, to see all these Jewish wars, holy wars, when they don't believe in killing, isn't it? All these people stealing from each other, yet they don't believe in stealing. In all of these aberrational Jewish exceptions to the rule, with proprietary nature of Jewish law being broke by the Jews themselves. And then people who are Gentiles who believe they're Christians from Palestine, but yet they live in America, or they live in Britain, or they live somewhere else, right? It's a widespread religion, just like a cult. But what has it actually done for people? It's clothed some of them in Jesus' mission. It's housed some of them. Other than that, it's rampant abuse in the church, and it's rampant alcoholism and rampant judgment, not forgiveness. They're going against Jesus' word. So it's not the end of the world. That's the problem. I believe the end of this Jewish spiritualities will free themselves, will free the world and free all of humanity of this Jewish poison and of these goat-herding sects, of the Israelites, the Christians, and the Islam. People will convert just as they have to Buddhism, a spiritual practice, not a religion. And guess what? They'll free themselves. They'll emancipate their minds, the soul, and their body by practicing rational thoughts and actions instead of trying to just help other strangers who can't stop whatever they're doing. They can't stop drinking. They can't stop drugs taking. They can't stop hurting people. They can't stop buying weapons. They can't stop overspending. They can't stop overeating too much. They can't stop judging each other. Isn't that true? So they have all of this Christianity and love for a Palestinian Messiah and a gold cross around their neck, but they don't practice what they preach, do they? Unless they do help someone. But if you help someone, they've never learned how to help themselves. They'll now always rely on you. Isn't that true? Or they'll say, well, Jesus will save me. I say, but you have to save yourself. Otherwise, you'll always be relying on another person to save you. This is what God has willed, and you will see the world turn from a goat-herding cult of Judaism, Christianity, and Islam into, just as America is converting to Buddhism, without one missionary trying to convert anyone, without anyone knocking on one person's door saying, would you like to subscribe to the ideas of Siddhartha from India, that haven't hurt a soul, not one, have not hurt anyone. No holy wars, no bankruptcies, no prisoners, nothing. Nothing of this sort, certainly not as much as Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. A Jewish feudal war that has been going on for 5,700 years in 3 different chapters of bloody history, blood in the desert, blood in the sand. People want to drink wine and abuse each other, save the homeless, which they should. But if the homeless wouldn't stop drinking and stop drugs taking, and if they had better health care and some homes, and if they were more practical, instead of putting all of their money into Jewish architecture, they'd just put it into the substructure of culture and the government of, more food pantries, more rehabs, more schools available, more healthcare, more hospitals, actually give people free healthcare or some kind of reduced healthcare and make actually this work, and some kind of sobriety and spirituality that doesn't offend them and hurt them. Do you understand? So the world will free themselves of this Jewish goat-herding sect. And believe me, Buddhism will become a much larger spirituality, as yoga will. Because this is what God has willed. It's happening in America. Buddhism is the 4th largest spirituality. And the other Judaistic faiths or religions are the ones who've caused quite a amount of damage. So in America, you have a $20 billion debt, and you have 1 million people in jail, probably as prisoners in a free country. That is a Christian nation that's supposed to practice forgiveness nonetheless. And I thought forgiving wasn't putting people in jail. Obviously, some of them, you have to put them somewhere, but they shouldn't have done what they've done. But people have to learn how to forgive if they're going to call themselves a Christian nation. Isn't that true? Or they have to stop building statues and architecture they can't afford if they're non-idolatrous, right? If they don't believe in idolatry as Jews, as Hebrew Orthodox goat-herding sects of occult worship religions, they have to stop putting all of their money into temples, chandeliers, diamonds, and exploiting Africans and saying that this is a religion. And now let's write it off as a charity. So they can get a tax shelter also for their conspiracy of the Israelites or of the Egyptians. Free your mind and let your soul be free. Because the Jews have imprisoned everyone with brainwashing of a Israeli, Egyptian, Palestinian court, which has not benefited the world as much as it has hurt them, literally, financially, socially. Prisons, prisoners, holy wars, jails, death, millions of people die. This is not what spirituality is supposed to cause. Human nature caused this. But God knows. God knows man has to free itself. God can't do it for them.